Hello, and welcome to this brief presentation related to product design specifications. This presentation builds on two previous presentations, the first being an overview related to customer design requirements and the development of a product design specification, or PDS for short, and the second presentation related to an actual PDS that was generated based on the contents of the first presentation. So essentially the first presentation generically outlined the requirements that could be stated by a customer and included within a PDS, and the second presentation essentially tried to apply these design requirements in the context of a particular product. We strongly encourage that you review the previous two presentations before reviewing this presentation. In this presentation we're going to consider the product design specification outlined within presentation 2 and endeavour to highlight some of the typical errors that can occur when developing product design specifications. So in the previous presentation related to our product design specification for the Tiddlywink Integrated Tester, I used version 15 to outline the design requirements associated with this particular product. For this particular exercise, I'm going to consider a previous issue, issue 5, and use that to endeavour to highlight some of the errors that can occur when drafting product design specifications. I refer to this as my DAF document, as it's essentially a slightly light-hearted document. So on this slide I'm showing you essentially the title page or the front cover of the PDS. On the left hand side showing you all the salient information and also the amendment box shown here, showing the development of issues 1 through to issue 5. So I now consider extracts from this version 5 of the PDS. As I say, I just highlight some of the typical errors I've noticed that students make and indeed I myself make when developing a PDS. You may find more errors in the document than I'm actually highlighting, but I'm just trying to indicate the typical errors that can occur. So referring back to the title page again, we know it's actually issue 5, and on the right hand side of the slide I've got the first page of the document, and straight away we can see there's problems with this first page as it now says issue 4 at the top. Obviously the issue has not been updated between the front cover and the rest of the document. There also seems to be a rather large amount of space left at the top here. I'm not quite sure why that should be, but I would suggest we don't need to leave such a large space at the beginning of the page. And also other errors are occurring here which I'll highlight in more detail on the next slide. So I just enlarge this page of the document and clearly we can highlight the issue number is incorrect, and even the title here is not the same as on the front page. We have a hyphen in the title here for Tiddlywink. There is no hyphen on the front page for Tiddlywink. So lack of consistency here. So the document information is not the same as on the front cover, so that's an error. We've already highlighted that there's a excess space at the top of the document for some reason, and this could have been found by proofreading the document, so we should always proofread our documents before issue, and also using the print preview option within the word processing package would help to display the entire page and again check for layout issues. Here an incorrect word has been used. This sentence should begin with this specification should be red. We have the wrong red there, it's a red colour, so we've got incorrect word used. So again we should always proofread the document and indeed also use our grammar check. There's an error here in the PDS because we've actually stated a document that should really be added to the reference section. We'll see in a moment is not in the reference section, and also this should be referred to as a reference to, for example, as opposed to stating the full title of the document here. So we need to add this to the reference section. Further down the first page again we've got a problem here. So we'll check our grammar usage. This is the wrong principle with an AL at the end. And again we should really spell check the document because this is the wrong spelling for engineer. Here's our table of contents. It should be fully automated by using headings within our word processing document, and then we can automate the table of contents with a heading. But what we'll notice is there's no reference section here, and in a moment we'll see there is a reference section. So again we need to ensure that we always update our table of contents before issuing the product design specification. Here's an error students sometimes make. This is the wrong forward. We should use the correct terminology within our design specification. The forward of the specification or document is spelled as shown here. Here's an extract from the introduction. It states here the Tiddlywink Integrated Tester This is actually the first time this term has been used within the specification. The acronym should have been stated, so we should have stated the TwIT in brackets after Tiddlywink Integrated Tester. Notice down here we've used the acronym, but it's not been defined above, so it needed to be defined when first used. And also within the documents, always endeavour to write as concisely as possible. In this statement here, it says the following considerations outline the design specification that is to be adhered to when designing and developing the TwIT. The words "that is" are not really required here. We could simply state the following considerations outline the design specification to be adhered to when designing and developing the TwIT. So it's very easy to add in additional words that are not really required. I must say I often make that mistake myself, but something to be aware of when you're developing your own product design specifications or compiling reports in general. Here we have our list of references. It's not in the table of contents because it's not been updated, but section 4 should have been references. You can see section 4 is definitions, and the table of contents was not automatically updated. And we seem to have a reference 1 here for British Standard quadruple 8, but the reference has not been defined. So we always should define our references, state the date of issue and the full title. This allows the user of the PDS, in this case, to access the correct document at the correct version. The definition section, we're defining the word integrated here, defined as recognized as being reliable or official. But note the recognized here is spelled using the Z instead of the S, so this is an American spelling. And generally we should be using English spelling, so we need to ensure that we set our spell checkers to the UK setting. Also within documents we should always avoid stereotyping and any derogatory comments. That seems to be suggested here. We should avoid such comments, even if stated in jest. Within product design specifications or technical reports, they're very serious documents, so such comments must be avoided at all times. Here's an extract from the actual design considerations under the heading of performance here. And we should always be consistent with the units we state. Within product design specification, we do often state the SI units and the equivalent imperial units. That's an acceptable approach. But notice here, the PDS states 2 dimensions in terms of millimeters and then 1 in terms of centimeters. We should generally avoid use of centimeters. It's a non-preferred SI unit. But we certainly should be consistent with our units. There's no reason I can see to state the diameter at the base of the pot in terms of centimeters and the diameter at the top of the pot in terms of millimeters. It doesn't really make any sense. So again, just be consistent with our units. Performance continued. Be careful when specifying tolerances, for example. It says here the tolerance required on all linear measurements shall be plus or minus 1 micrometer. That might be an excessive tolerance for this particular product, and it could cause complications or refinements within the manufacturing process to comply with this requirement. So just be aware that unnecessary tolerances can be costly within the design manufacture process. Further criteria here, we've headed of the market. Note within a product design specification, we should only use the words shall and should within our clauses. So it says here the tester will be designed for both domestic and international Tiddlywink tournament circuits, but we should really use shall or should. Shall is essentially a mandatory requirement. We have to comply with the shall requirement, and a should is seen as a preferential requirement, something the customer prefers, but it's not essential if it causes problems within the design and development process. Maybe the requirement is too costly to include, too time consuming to include, etc. So use only shall or should for each of the clauses, not will or must. And also write such formal documents such as specifications or technical reports using an impersonal style. So avoid the use of you or me, I, us, we within such formal documents. Write in the impersonal style. Also within such formal documents, try to avoid the use of short forms such as shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, can't, etc. In this case, it would be preferable to write should not as opposed to should. So it's considered preferable to avoid the use of short forms within formal documents. In the heading of ergonomics here, notice in clause 6.4.1 it says the tester must be damn easy to use Obviously we should avoid such slang terms within formal documents, formal specifications, and also a requirement here for 6.4.3. It says the tester should be easy enough for a 2-year-old child to operate, and again that might be an unnecessary requirement. It causes additional complication in trying to design for a 2-year-old to operate to make it as simple as possible for such a situation. So is that a realistic or even valid requirement to include within the specification? In fairness, it does actually say should here, so it's more of an optional requirement. So it may be that the design engineer will ignore that particular requirement if it proves to be too complex, too difficult, too costly to incorporate within the final design, but something they should consider as it's included within the specification. Aesthetic section here says the appearance of the tester should look very nice. Again, we need to be much more specific with our requirements, avoid any potential ambiguity, avoid subjectivity within the clauses stated. So what do we mean by very nice? That's a very subjective statement. What looks very nice to one person may not be considered very nice to another. And again, some errors here under the heading of cost. The clause says it should be as cheap as a packet of bird food. Totally unhelpful statement, but not less than 2 yen. So several errors here. Firstly, we should state a specific target cost, be very definitive about our cost, and use the correct adjective, of course in this particular case for cheap. And also we should ensure we use conventional units. If it refers to the weight, it says the weight shall be less than half a bag of sugar, or 0.0005 ton. We should always use conventional units. I would suggest the yen really should be in terms of pounds or dollars, and the half a bag of sugar and the 0.0005 ton really should have been stated as 0.5 kilograms, or even preferably in newtons. So we always use conventional values in units within the specification. Again, there is a slang term here, and it says it should be mega reliable. We should avoid the slang, and of course mega reliable is absolutely meaningless to a design engineer. Some more errors here on this slide. We always try to avoid the use of please within such a document. Just state the requirements here. And we also need to avoid the use of short forms, it'll, to use it will, and avoid the use of slang or colloquial expressions in our documents. Notice clause 6.10.2 is not actually a requirement because it does not have a shall or a should within the statement. Just try to indicate that detachable parts are not preferred, but it really should have a shall or a should. So this clause here is not currently a design requirement. Also notice in clause 6.10.3 they've stated that all manufacturing activities shall comply with the Health and Safety at Work Act, but that really should be defined in the reference section, and we would probably state here reference 2 or reference 3, whatever listing it is in the reference section, instead of stating the title. We only state the titles of our references in the reference section. From thereafter we just refer to them as reference 1, reference 2, etc. So in this section here we would have all our references stated with the full title and the listing of the numbers 1, 2, 3, etc. So in the main body of the document we simply refer to reference 1, reference 2. That way we do not include the title of the reference throughout the PDS. So if an update in the references occurs, say the date changes or the standard changes, we do not have to find all the locations of where the standard is stated. We simply update the reference section. So as I said, we just use reference 1, 2, etc. within the main body of the document. Under the heading of lifespan here, it states the tester shall last 50 years or 24,000 measurements. That would appear to be an excessive requirement. We really want the tester to last 50 years. And again, the number of measurements there we'd have to survey to find out if that's an excessive requirement or not, depending on the usage. But even so, stating such a requirement in terms of a shall clause means it has to be incorporated within the design. That might now require more exotic or wear-resistant materials, or surface finishes, or tolerances, etc., etc. So always endeavour not to include excessive design requirements within the specification. And again, here another derogatory comment. We should avoid such derogatory comments. Under the heading of environment, clause 6.13.1 states the tester must. And again, as stated before, we only use shall within a clause related to a mandatory requirement. or should related to customer preferred requirements. We seem to try to avoid superfluous information. We seem to have some information here that really is not required, slightly derogatory as well. So we avoid superfluous information. We just need to be very specific, very concise, very precise within our product design specifications and technical reports in general. And again, further personalization, which we try to avoid within such documents. This sometimes occurs, usually by mistake. We have here inconsistent fonts used. We should preferably use the same font throughout the document, although sometimes headings, subsection headings can be in different fonts to the main body text. But here, quite obviously, we've got an inconsistent font and it's not particularly easy to read either. So always use consistent, easy to read fonts throughout the document. So always proofread your document. Hopefully you'll find such issues if they occur. Under the heading of timescales here, TEDG 618.1 says the project should be completed in record time. Of course, that's a useless statement. We need to be very specific about milestones within the project process. We should really have a specific time for the various phases within the design process, often referred to as milestones. Again, personalization has occurred here. And where acronyms are used, they need to be defined in the text. So if this is the first instance of referring to critical path analysis, the acronym should be defined here in this location. So the text should say Gantt charts and critical path analysis with CPA in brackets after the words critical path analysis. Again, with regards to instruction manual requirement, seems quite valid that a set of user instructions shall be supplied, written in English, but I've also included Esperanto and Braille, and these may be considered excessive requirements. Do we really need those particular languages? If we do, that's fine, but it might be preferable to use French or Spanish or Mandarin maybe, but try to avoid unnecessary or excessive requirements being stated within the design specification. And here's a common error that can occur within compiling any document. Be very careful with the use of the word there, meaning belonging to, there, as in we will go there, or there meaning they are. In this particular case, the incorrect there has been used. But hopefully proofreading and using spelling and grammar checks will highlight such errors. And finally, there is an appendix included within this product design specification related to background information for our Tiddlywink Integrated Tester, but there does not seem to be anything included here. So if we do need the appendix, we need to add the content as required and also refer to the appendix within the main body of the document as appropriate. If the appendix is not required, then we need to remove the heading and update the document and of course the table of contents. So that's an overview of some of the typical errors that can occur when compiling design specifications or indeed any technical document within engineering. So finally, I've tried to summarize some of the potential errors that can occur within report writing, and that's been highlighted in this presentation. And this could maybe be used as a checklist when you next prepare your PDS or technical report to try and ensure you haven't made some of these errors. So briefly outlining them, they're in no particular order here. But 1, always proofread your document. 2, always spell and grammar check your document, because it does depend on the audience. 3, ensure that the issue number is updated throughout the document, not just on the front cover. 4, always write using an impersonal style, so avoid the use of such terms as you, me, I, us, etc. 5, ensure the table of contents is fully automated and updated for the latest issue. 6, avoid the use of short forms. Try to avoid use of can't, wouldn't, shouldn't, couldn't, etc., etc. 7, avoid stereotyping or derogatory terms. 8, avoid colloquial speak, flippant comments, use of slang. 9, ensure all references used are fully defined within the reference section. 10, define acronyms when they're first used within the document. And for larger documents, you may even include a list of acronyms towards the beginning of the report or product design specification. Item 11, write concisely, so use concise statements in the description throughout. Item 12 here, state specific requirements to avoid ambiguity and any subjectivity that might occur. 13. Use conventional and consistent units throughout the document. 14. Use consistent fonts throughout the document. Item 15. Within a product design specification, only use the terms shall, which is mandatory, and should, i.e. meaning preferred, to define design requirements within the clauses stated. So if a clause states the final colour of the product shall be red, then we need to ensure the final product has that colour. If it states that the final product should be red, then that's a preference, but it's not mandatory to comply with. 16, as we highlighted previously, avoid excessive design requirements. These can be costly and time consuming. And 17, if an appendix is included, this needs to be referred to within the main body of the document. And the same if appendices are used. The various appendices should be referred to within the main body. So that concludes the presentation, which I hope has been of some use to you, and as always, thank you for viewing.